The German Shepherd sat motionless beside the trash bin, her dark fur barely visible against the falling snow. Temperature -15 degrees. Cars pulled into the Highway 40 rest stop, headlights cutting through the blizzard. People rushed past, collars pulled high, breath fogging in the frigid December air. Not one stopped. Not one looked twice at the dog whose belly bulged grotesquely with pregnancy, whose neck twisted under the weight of a tumor the size of a cantaloupe. Her brown eyes followed each passerby with the same silent plea. "Please. I'm carrying babies. I don't want to die here in the cold. Please see me." The shepherd's breathing came in shallow gasps. Ice crystals formed on her whiskers. Her body trembled, not from cold alone, but from exhaustion, pain, and the approaching moment when 5 lives inside her would either enter this world or perish with her in the snow. That's when Margaret Thompson's pickup truck pulled into the lot. What happened next would change everything. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Margaret Maggie Thompson was 72 years old, and she had come to the rest stop to make a decision about dying. The pill bottle sat in her coat pocket. 60 sleeping tablets, more than enough. She'd planned it carefully. Drive to this anonymous place, swallow them with lukewarm coffee from the thermos, fall asleep in the heated truck. They'd find her in the morning. Clean. Simple. No burden on anyone. Because there was no one left to burden. Her husband, Colonel James Thompson, had died 20 years ago. Heart attack at 55. She'd buried him with full military honors at the Veterans Cemetery outside Pinewood, Colorado. Her son, Sergeant Michael Thompson, had died in Afghanistan 10 years ago. 29 years old, K-9 handler. The Army sent her a folded flag and a letter thanking her for his sacrifice. She'd kept his bedroom exactly as he'd left it, door closed, memories sealed inside like a tomb. Now she lived alone in a house built for a family, at a dining table set for one, in a town where everyone knew her name but nobody really knew her anymore. The clinic, Mitchell Veterinary Services specializing in military animals, was drowning in debt. $45,000 owed to the bank. Foreclosure notice dated December 25th. Christmas Day. How fitting. She'd spent 30 years as a military veterinary nurse, healing the dogs and horses that served alongside soldiers. She'd retired 5 years ago, opened the clinic to continue the work to honor Michael's memory. But Pinewood was too small, the military contracts too scarce, and grief was expensive. This morning, she'd counted $347 in her checking account. The pharmacy had called about her arthritis prescription, past due. The heating bill sat unopened on the kitchen counter. She'd thought, what's the point anymore, Doctor? Robert Henderson stopped by sometimes, her old colleague from the service, 68 now, fighting cancer he couldn't afford to treat properly. Grace Chen, her 28-year-old assistant, was 8 months pregnant and grieving her husband, dead 3 months in a car accident. They were kind to her, but they had their own sorrows. The coffee in her thermos had gone cold. The pill bottle felt heavy in her pocket. She'd been sitting in the parking lot for 20 minutes, working up the courage. Then she'd noticed the dog by the trash bin. And something ancient stirred in her chest, some old instinct from 3 decades of saving lives, some muscle memory stronger than despair. She opened the truck door and stepped into the snow. The cold bit through Maggie's coat as she crossed the parking lot. Her knees protested, arthritis flaring in the freezing air, but she kept walking. Up close, the dog was worse than she'd imagined. A German shepherd, purebred by the look of her, but so thin Maggie could count ribs beneath matted fur. The tumor dominated the right side of her neck, distorting her profile, pulling her head at an unnatural angle. Her belly hung low and tight with pregnancy. Dark eyes tracked Maggie's approach. Intelligent eyes full of something Maggie recognized too well. Resignation. "Hey there, girl," Maggie said softly. kneeling in the snow despite the pain shooting through her joints. "It's okay. I'm here to help." She extended her hand slowly, palm down, non-threatening. The shepherd's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. She flinched violently, tucking her head, cowering as if expecting a blow. Maggie froze. She'd worked with abused animals for 3 decades. She knew that flinch. This dog had been beaten, systematically, repeatedly. "Oh, sweetheart," Maggie whispered. "What did they do to you?" The shepherd looked up again, and their eyes met. In that moment, Maggie saw everything. The pain, the fear, the desperate hope that this human might be different. The dog's tail gave one weak wag, an offering of trust, despite every reason not to trust. Maggie felt something crack open in her chest, some door she'd welded shut 10 years ago. She thought of Michael. His last phone call from Kandahar. "Mom, these dogs, they give everything. They trust us completely. We owe them everything." She removed her coat, her only coat, and wrapped it around the trembling dog. The shepherd whimpered but didn't resist. Maggie tried to lift her, gasped at the weight, tried again. Her arms shook. 72-year-old arms, arthritic shoulders, but she got the dog up, staggered toward the truck, laid her across the back seat. The shepherd's tongue licked her hand once, weakly. Maggie named her silently. Hope. Because if this dog could still hope, maybe she could too. The drive back to Pinewood should have taken 45 minutes. The blizzard made it 90. Wind howled across Highway 40, pushing snow sideways across the road. Maggie's headlights barely penetrated the white curtain. Behind her, Hope's breathing was audible, labored, rattling. "Just hold on," Maggie murmured. 20 more minutes. You can do this." The truck hit a patch of black ice. Everything slowed. The wheel jerked in Maggie's hands. The truck fishtailed left, then right. She saw the guardrail approaching, saw the drop beyond it, saw the end of both their lives in crystal clarity. Her hands moved on instinct. Turn into the skid, ease off the gas, don't brake. The truck spun a full rotation before the tires caught pavement again. Maggie sat gripping the wheel, heart hammering, breath coming in gasps. In the back seat, Hope whimpered. "I know, girl," Maggie said. "I know. But we're okay. We're going to make it." She looked at her hands on the wheel. They'd stopped shaking. For the first time in months, maybe years, she felt absolutely present, absolutely alive. The pill bottle in her coat pocket, now wrapped around Hope, suddenly seemed like something from another lifetime. Mitchell Veterinary Clinic was dark when they arrived at 9 o'clock. Maggie carried Hope through the back entrance, laid her on the examination table under harsh fluorescent lights. The dog's breathing had worsened. Her gums were pale. Shock setting in, Maggie called Dr. Bob Henderson. He answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep and pain medication. "Bob, I need you. Now." He heard something in her voice. "On my way." Grace Chen arrived 15 minutes later, moving awkwardly with her pregnant belly. She took one look at Hope, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." "I need you to set up the monitors," Maggie said, already pulling on surgical gloves, "and call the 24-hour pharmacy. We're going to need antibiotics, fluids, everything." Bob arrived looking gray and exhausted, but his hands were steady as he began the examination. He palpated the tumor, listened to Hope's heart, checked her pupils. "Maggie," he said quietly, "this is bad. The tumor's wrapped around the bone. She's hypothermic, and she's got 5, maybe 6 puppies in there. Could go into labor any time." Grace ran the microchip scanner across Hope's shoulder. It beeped. "Got one," she said. Then, surprised, "Wait, 2 chips?" Maggie leaned in to read the screen. The first chip showed a civilian registry, recently registered to a Marcus Webb in Pinewood. The second chip made her heart stop. U.S. Military K-9 database. Name, Liberty. Status, retired. Medical discharge. Last handler, classified. Lineage, descended from K-9 Rex. Grace was typing rapidly. I can cross-reference the military database through the old system. Maggie barely heard her. Rex. She knew that name. Michael had talked about Rex in his last letters. The dog who'd saved his unit. The dog who'd died in the same explosion that killed her son. Maggie? Grace's voice seemed to come from far away. The DNA match. Liberty is Rex's granddaughter. The room tilted. Maggie gripped the examination table. Your son's dog, Grace whispered. Michael's Rex. This is his granddaughter. Maggie's hands trembled as she held the print out. Rex's granddaughter. Michael's dog's bloodline. The room seemed to contract around her, 10 years of grief pressing down like a physical weight. Maggie? Bob touched her shoulder gently. Are you okay? She wasn't okay. She would never be okay. But Hope, Liberty, was dying on her examination table, and there were decisions to make. How much? Maggie asked, her voice steadier than she felt. For the surgery? All of it? How much? Bob exchanged glances with Grace. To do this properly, tumor removal, C-section if needed, post-operative care, we're looking at $15,000, minimum. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I have $347 in my account, Maggie said quietly. My credit cards are maxed. The bank is foreclosing on the clinic in 7 days. Grace's face crumpled. There has to be a way. There isn't. Maggie looked down at Hope. The shepherd's eyes were closed now, breath shallow. We should call animal control. Let them handle it humanely. No! The word came out sharper than Maggie intended. She took a breath. No, I can't. I won't. She thought of the pill bottle in her coat pocket. The decision she'd been ready to make just hours ago. Give up. Let go. Stop fighting. But Hope was still fighting. With infection, hypothermia, pregnancy, and a tumor that should have killed her days ago. This dog was still fighting. I have something, Maggie said suddenly. She reached for her left hand, twisted off the gold band she'd worn for 30 years. Her wedding ring, the last piece of James she carried every day. Bob's eyes widened. Maggie, no. The pawn shop on Maple stays open until midnight. She pressed the ring into his palm. This will get us something. Not enough, but something. Grace was crying now. I have money. $3,000. It was supposed to be for the baby, but Grace, I can't let you. My husband was Army, Grace interrupted, her hand on her pregnant belly. He would have wanted this. He loved the military dogs. Please, let me help. Bob looked at both women, then down at the ring in his hand. I'll waive my fee and, he paused, I have cancer. Stage 3. Maybe 4 months left if I'm lucky. I've been saving for treatment I can't afford anyway. Let me do something that matters with the time I have. Maggie felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. The supplies. We still need surgical supplies, antibiotics. I'll call Charlie at the medical supply warehouse, Bob said, already pulling out his phone. He's a veteran. When I tell him what this is about, maybe he'll work with us on payment. The next hour passed in a blur of phone calls and desperate calculations. The pawn shop offered $1,200 for the ring, highway robbery, but they had no choice. Grace transferred her $3,000 through her phone's banking app. Bob's contact at the warehouse agreed to deliver supplies immediately with a promise of payment within 60 days. By 11:45, they had scraped together enough to begin. but they hadn't accounted for Marcus Webb. The phone rang at 11:53. Grace answered, listened, then held the receiver toward Maggie with a stricken expression. "It's the owner, listed on the civilian chip registry." Maggie took the phone. "This is Dr. Margaret Thompson. I have your dog." "That bitch is still alive?" The male voice was rough, angry. "I dropped her at that rest stop 3 days ago." 3 days. Hope had been sitting there for 3 days, freezing, starving, waiting for someone to care. "She's in critical condition," Maggie said, fighting to keep her voice professional. "She needs immediate surgery. I'm calling to inform you of medical decisions that need to be made." "Do whatever you want. She's useless. Been nothing but trouble since I got her." "You're declining treatment?" "I'm saying I don't give a damn what you do. Put her down for all I care." The line went dead. Maggie stood holding the phone, rage simmering in her chest. Grace and Bob were staring at her. "He said put her down," Maggie said flatly. "Which means legally we have clearance to—" The clinic's front door slammed open. Marcus Webb filled the doorway, 6'3", 250 pounds, face red with anger and cold. He spotted Hope on the examination table and pointed. "That's my dog. I'm taking her." "You just told me to put her down," Maggie said. "Changed my mind. She's my property." He pulled papers from his jacket. "Ownership documents. Signed over to me 18 months ago by the Military Rehabilitation Program. Everything legal." Maggie scanned the documents. They were legitimate. "You abandoned her," Grace said, stepping forward despite her pregnant belly. "For 3 days. Prove it." Marcus's smile was ugly. "I've been looking for my lost dog. So grateful you found her. Now, hand her over." "She needs surgery," Bob interjected. "She'll die without it." "Then she dies. Not your concern." Marcus moved toward the examination table. Hope's eyes opened, and she made a sound Maggie had never heard from her before. A low, desperate whine of pure terror. Maggie stepped between Marcus and the dog. "Get out of my clinic. Give me my dog, or I'm calling the sheriff. You're holding stolen property." They stared at each other for a long moment. Maggie could feel her heart pounding, could feel 72 years of playing by the rules, warring with something more primal. "You have 24 hours to return my property," Marcus said finally. "Or I'm pressing charges." He turned and walked out, leaving the door hanging open, December wind howling through the clinic. Grace rushed to close it. Bob checked Hope's vitals. Maggie stood frozen. "What do we do?" Grace whispered. Before Maggie could answer, Hope's body convulsed. "She's seizing." Bob grabbed the medication cart. "Grace, get the—" Hope convulsed again, harder. Then her water broke, amniotic fluid pooling on the examination table. "Oh, God," Grace breathed. "She's in labor." Bob's face went white. "She can't deliver naturally. The tumor's blocking the birth canal. If we don't do a C-section now, we'll lose her and all the puppies." "We don't have full anesthesia yet," Grace said, panic creeping into her voice. "The delivery's not coming until midnight." "We use what we have." Maggie was already scrubbing her hands. "We operate now." "Maggie, the risk is death if we don't." She looked at Bob. "You said you wanted to do something that matters. This is it, right now." Another contraction rippled through Hope's body. The dog's eyes found Maggie's, pleading, trusting despite everything. Bob took a shaky breath. "Okay. Okay. Grace, prep the surgical field. Maggie, you'll lead. My hands aren't steady enough anymore. I haven't done surgery in 10 years. It's like riding a bike." Bob managed a weak smile. A very high-stakes, life-or-death bike. They worked in synchronized chaos. Grace set up the monitoring equipment with shaking hands. Bob prepared the limited anesthesia they had on hand. Maggie laid out surgical instruments, her mind automatically falling into old patterns, old protocols. Hope went under sedation at 12:47 a.m. Maggie made the first incision at 12:52. The C-section had to come first. The puppies were in distress, heartbeats erratic on the monitor. Maggie's hands moved with muscle memory, opening the uterine wall, reaching inside. The first puppy emerged blue and silent. "Grace, CPR," Maggie ordered, already reaching for the second. Grace took the tiny body, began compressions with 2 fingers, breathing into the puppy's nose. 30 seconds, 45. At 60 seconds, the puppy gasped and began to cry. "Got one," Grace sobbed, moving the puppy to the warming box. Second puppy, breathing on its own. Third puppy, breathing. Fourth puppy, blue but responded to stimulation. Fifth puppy, nothing. Grace worked on the fifth for 3 minutes before Bob gently stopped her. "Grace, it's gone." Grace wrapped the tiny body in a towel, placed it carefully to the side. "I'm sorry, Hope," she whispered. But Hope couldn't hear. Her heart rate was dropping. "She's crashing," Bob called. "Blood pressure's through the floor." Maggie hadn't even started on the tumor yet. Blood was everywhere, more than there should be. Internal bleeding somewhere. "We need to close her up," Bob said urgently. "Forget the tumor." "Just close?" "No." Maggie's voice was steel. "If we don't remove it now, the infection will kill her in days. This is our only chance. She won't survive both procedures. She won't survive without them." Maggie looked at Bob. "You take over the C-section. Close her up. I'm going for the tumor." "Maggie, that's insane. We can't work on both sites simultaneously. Watch me." For the next 4 hours, they performed surgery that should have been impossible. Bob closed the uterine incision while Maggie exposed the tumor. Grace ran between them, monitoring vitals, handing instruments, keeping 4 newborn puppies alive in the warming box. Hope's heart stopped at 2:17 a.m. Bob started chest compressions while Maggie kept working. 30 seconds, 60, 90. "Come on," Maggie muttered through clenched teeth. "Come on, Hope. Don't you quit. Don't you dare quit." At 2 minutes, the heart monitor beeped. Once, twice. Rhythm established. "Got her back," Bob gasped, returning to his work. The tumor was worse than the scans suggested. It had invaded the collarbone, wrapped around blood vessels. Maggie had to remove part of the bone structure. The dog would never move quite right again, but she'd be alive. They transfused Bob's own blood when Hope's pressure dropped again, same blood type, tested quickly. An old man donating his blood to save a dog at 3 in the morning. The last suture went in at 5:23 a.m. just as dawn broke over Pinewood. 4 puppies alive in the warming box, 1 tiny body wrapped in a towel already cold. Hope unconscious but stable, breathing on her own, heartbeat steady. All 3 humans covered in blood, swaying with exhaustion. Bob collapsed into a chair. Grace sat heavily on the floor, one hand on her pregnant belly. Maggie stood over Hope, watching her breathe. "We did it," Grace whispered. "Oh my God, we actually did it." Maggie couldn't speak. She reached down, placed her hand gently on Hope's head. The dog's fur was soft under her fingers. "Welcome back, girl," she murmured. Through the clinic windows, Christmas lights blinked on across Main Street. December 19th, 6 days until the bank took everything. But right now, in this moment, they'd saved 6 lives. It would have to be enough. The morning sun through the clinic windows felt obscene, too bright, too cheerful for what the night had cost them. Maggie sat beside Hope's recovery crate, her body screaming with exhaustion and arthritic pain. She hadn't slept, couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Hope's heart monitor flatline, heard the alarms shriek, felt the desperate rhythm of chest compressions under her palms. Hope lay motionless except for the steady rise and fall of her chest. Tubes and wires connected her to monitors. The incision sites, 2 of them, were wrapped in clean white bandages that made the dog look small and fragile. The 4 surviving puppies huddled in a warming box nearby, their tiny bodies pressed together for comfort and heat. Without their mother's milk, they'd need bottle feeding every 2 hours. Maggie had already fed them once at 6 a.m., their desperate suckling breaking her heart. Grace had gone home at dawn, moving like a woman twice her age, one hand supporting her pregnant belly. Bob had collapsed around 5:30, not dramatically, just a slow slide into unconsciousness. They'd moved him to the recovery room, where he now slept under blankets. His breathing labored. The dead puppy lay in the refrigerator, wrapped in a clean towel, standard protocol. They'd cremate the body later, when everyone had energy for grief. Maggie's phone buzzed, a text from Sally Henderson, who owned the corner diner on Main Street. "Heard what you did last night. Everyone's talking. You're a hero." Then another text, from a number she didn't recognize. "You should have let that mutt die. Waste of money." And another, "God bless you, Dr. Thompson." And another, "My tax dollars paying for dog surgery? Ridiculous." Maggie silenced her phone. By noon, 3 news vans had parked outside the clinic. She ignored the knocking, the shouted questions through the door. Let them speculate. She had a patient to monitor. Hope's eyes opened at 2 p.m. It happened slowly, a flutter of lids, a brief confusion, then focus. The dog's gaze found Maggie immediately, and her tail moved once, weakly, against the blanket. "Hey there, brave girl," Maggie whispered, her throat tight. "You made it. You and your babies." Hope tried to lift her head, whimpered at the pain. "Easy, easy. You're going to hurt for a while." Maggie stroked the dog's head gently, avoiding the bandages. "But you're alive. That's what matters." Hope's nose twitched. She was scenting the air, searching for her puppies. Maggie carefully lifted the warming box, held it where Hope could see inside. 4 tiny bodies, squirming and mewling. Hope's whole body seemed to relax. She made a soft sound, maternal, protective, and tried again to move. "Not yet," Maggie said firmly. "You're too weak. But I promise I'm taking care of them." Every 2 hours, like clockwork. Hope looked at Maggie, then back at the puppies, then at Maggie again. Some communication passed between them, trust, maybe, or understanding. The dog closed her eyes and settled back into sleep. The knock at the back door was different from the reporter's aggressive banging, quiet, almost apologetic. Maggie found Pastor Michael Davies on the step, hat in hands, looking like a man on his way to a funeral. "Dr. Thompson, may I come in?" She almost said no. Pastor Davies had buried her son, and she'd blamed God enough that church became impossible. But something in his expression made her step aside. He saw Hope in her crate, the puppies in their box, and his face crumpled. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh, dear Lord, if you're here to pray, I'm here to confess." He turned to face her, and she saw shame written in every line of his face. "I knew about Marcus Webb, about what he was doing." The words hung in the air like poison. "You knew he was abusing her?" "I suspected, strongly. Others had reported concerns, but Marcus—" He swallowed. "Marcus donates $10,000 a year to our church, keeps the lights on, pays for the youth programs. I told myself I had no proof. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere without evidence. You chose money over a living creature's suffering." "Yes." His voice broke. "Yes, I did. And I will have to live with that for the rest of my life. But I'm here now to tell you, whatever you need, whatever it costs, the church will help. I'll take it from Marcus's fund if I have to." Maggie studied him. 70 years of Methodist upbringing wanted her to accept his apology gracefully, but 30 years of military service made her blunt. Your guilt doesn't undo 3 days in the snow. It doesn't undo months of abuse. I know, but perhaps it can help with what comes next. He pulled an envelope from his jacket. Marcus is furious. He's been calling everyone, claiming you stole his property. He'll be back with the sheriff, I expect. Soon. As if summoned by prophecy, a patrol car pulled up outside. Sheriff Tom Bradley was 50, fair-minded, and clearly unhappy with his current duty. He stood in the clinic with his hat in his hands, looking anywhere but at Hope. "Maggie," he said quietly, "I'm sorry, but Marcus Webb has filed a formal complaint. That's his dog, legally. He's got the papers to prove it. He abandoned her to die. Can you prove that? He told me, on the phone, with no witnesses, his word against yours." Bradley sighed. "Look, I don't like this any more than you do. Everyone in town knows what you did last night. But the law's the law. He's giving you until noon tomorrow to return the dog, or he's pressing charges for theft. She just had surgery. Moving her could kill her. Then he'll have a dead dog, which I suspect is what he wants anyway." Bradley's jaw tightened. "I've got no legal grounds to stop him, Maggie. I'm sorry." After he left, Maggie sat in the silent clinic and felt the weight of 7 decades pressing down. She'd followed rules her whole life: military discipline, veterinary ethics, small-town propriety. And where had it gotten her? A dead husband, a dead son, a foreclosed clinic, and now a dog she'd sacrificed everything to save about to be handed back to her abuser. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Don't give her back to him." The voice was female, whispered, urgent. "Please. He'll kill her. I know he will." "Who is this?" "Linda. Linda Webb, Marcus's wife. Listen to me. I'm the one who left her at that rest stop." Maggie's breath caught. "You—" "I couldn't watch him do it. He was going to shoot her behind the barn, said she was worthless, that the pregnancy made her weak. I begged him not to, and he hit me. So I waited until he passed out drunk, and I drove her to the rest stop. I prayed someone would find her before she froze." "Why are you calling me now?" "Because he's on his way to the clinic. Right now. He's drunk, and he's angry, and he's got his gun. I had to warn you." The line went dead. Maggie moved on instinct. She locked the front door, drew the blinds, checked the back door. Locked. Bob was still unconscious in the recovery room. She couldn't move him. Hope couldn't be moved. The puppies. A truck roared into the parking lot. Through a gap in the blinds, Maggie watched Marcus Webb climb out of his pickup, unsteady on his feet. He reached into the cab and pulled out something long and dark. A rifle. Her heart hammered. She pulled out her phone, started to dial 911, then stopped. Bradley was 10 minutes away at best. Marcus was here now. She looked at Hope, at the 4 puppies, at Bob sleeping helplessly. Then she did something she hadn't done in 20 years. She went to James's old desk, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out the Colt .45 her husband had given her on their 10th anniversary. She checked the chamber. Loaded. Marcus pounded on the front door. "I know you're in there, Thompson. That's my property. You got no right." Maggie positioned herself between the door and Hope's crate, gun held steady in a 2-handed grip. Military training didn't fade. "Marcus, you're drunk. Go home. I'm taking my dog." "The dog stays here." "The hell she does." Something slammed against the door, his shoulder, probably. The frame cracked but held. "I'm armed, Marcus, and I will defend my patient." That stopped him. Silence. Then, "You're crazy, old woman." "Possibly. But I'm also a veteran who knows how to shoot. You want to test that?" More silence. Then the sound of his truck starting, tires squealing as he drove away. Maggie lowered the gun, realized she was shaking. Hope was awake, watching her with those intelligent brown eyes. The dog made a soft sound, not distress, but something else. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that Maggie had just stood between her and death. "Yeah," Maggie said quietly. "I got you, girl. I got you." The back door opened. Maggie spun, gun raised, then lowered it as Linda Webb stepped inside, sunglasses hiding her face despite the winter gloom. "I'm sorry," Linda said. "I'm so sorry. I should have done something sooner. I should have—" "Take off the sunglasses." Linda hesitated, then removed them. Her left eye was swollen shut, purple and black. Her lip was split. Finger-shaped bruises marked her throat. "How long?" Maggie asked. 15 years. Since our son David came back from Afghanistan." Linda's voice was flat, empty. "He came home paralyzed. Marcus blamed everyone but himself. The army, the dogs, David for enlisting, me for supporting him, but mostly himself, I think. The guilt ate him alive, turned him into something else. Why didn't you leave?" "Where would I go? He controls all the money. I have no family, no job. And he said if I ever left, he'd find me." She looked at Hope. "When he brought Liberty home, I thought maybe having a dog again would help. But he just transferred all his rage onto her." "Linda, you need to press charges." "With what evidence?" "He's careful. Hits where it doesn't show. And Sheriff Bradley's known Marcus since they were kids." "You think he'll believe me?" "I believe you." The simple statement made Linda's face crumple. She sank into a chair, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Maggie's phone buzzed. Grace. Coming back in. Brought someone who needs to meet Hope. 10 minutes later, Grace returned with a young man in a wheelchair. David Webb was 29, broad-shouldered despite the chair, with his father's jaw and his mother's gentle eyes. He maneuvered through the clinic door with practiced ease, then stopped when he saw his mother. "Mom, what are you—" His eyes tracked to her bruised face. "Oh, God. Mom." Linda turned away. "David, you shouldn't be here. Grace called me, told me what Dad did. All of it." He wheeled closer to Hope's crate, looked down at the sleeping dog. "This is Liberty?" "Hope," Maggie corrected quietly. "We call her Hope." David's hands gripped his wheelchair's armrests. "I knew her. At the base in Colorado Springs. She was just a puppy then, training with her handler. She used to come visit me during my physical therapy." His voice thickened. "She was descended from Rex. Did you know that?" "I know. Rex saved my life, pushed me out of the way of the IED. Took the blast meant for me." David looked up at Maggie, and she saw her own pain reflected back. "Your son was there. Sergeant Thompson. He pulled me out of the rubble. He went back for Rex, even though the area wasn't secure. He died saving Rex's life, but Rex died anyway." The words hit Maggie like a physical blow. She'd known Michael died in combat. She'd known it involved an IED and a K9 unit, but not this. Not that he'd died trying to save the dog that saved David Webb. "My father blames Rex for my paralysis," David continued. "The official report says Rex alerted to the IED. Dad thinks if Rex had been faster, I wouldn't be in this chair. But the truth is, without Rex, I'd be dead. We all would. The entire patrol." He wheeled closer to Hope, reached through the crate bars. Hope's nose twitched at his scent, and her eyes opened. She stared at David for a long moment, then her tail began to wag. Weak, but genuine. "Hey, girl," David whispered. Remember me? From PT? Hope's tail wagged harder. She tried to stand, whimpered, settled back down but stretched her neck to reach David's hand. When she licked his fingers, David began to cry. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry for what he did to you. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Linda moved to her son's side, placed a hand on his shoulder. Mother and son, both victims of Marcus Webb's rage, both finding something like healing in this broken dog. Maggie stepped out of the room to give them privacy. Grace followed. "How did you know?" Maggie asked. "Know what?" "That bringing David here was the right thing." Grace smiled tiredly, one hand on her pregnant belly. "My husband always said the best thing about military dogs is they don't hold grudges. They forgive us even when we don't deserve it. I thought maybe Hope could teach David that his father's sins aren't his." By evening, news of the standoff had spread through Pinewood like wildfire. The corner diner buzzed with debate. Sally Henderson declared loudly that Maggie was a hero. Others muttered about property rights and crazy old women with guns. But something else was happening too. At 7 p.m., Sally arrived at the clinic with $50 in cash. "From the dinner crowd," she said. They wanted to help. At 8 p.m., the VFW Post sent a representative with a check for $500. At 9 p.m., an elderly woman Maggie didn't recognize handed her a small jewelry box. Inside was a wedding ring. "It's all I have," the woman said. "My husband died last year. I think he'd want it to go to saving one of our military dogs." By midnight, nearly $3,000 had been donated. Grace, tabulating on her laptop, looked up with wonder. "Maggie, this is incredible. People are organizing. There's a Facebook page called Save Hope that has 2,000 followers. Someone started a GoFundMe." "A what?" "Online fundraising. It's already at $8,000. Maggie stared at the screen. Strangers from across the country donating $5, $10, $20, all because of one dog. "Why?" she whispered. "Because everyone loves an underdog," Grace said gently, "and because you reminded them that some things are worth fighting for." Hope woke around 1 a.m. for her medication. Maggie administered the antibiotics, checked the surgical sites, offered water through a dropper. The dog drank weakly, then turned her head toward the warming box where her puppies slept. "They're okay," Maggie assured her. "Fed them an hour ago, all 4 eating well." Hope's eyes found the refrigerator where the 5th puppy's body lay. She made a sound, low, mournful. Dogs knew, Maggie thought. They always knew. "I'm sorry," Maggie whispered. "I'm so sorry we couldn't save them all." Hope looked at her for a long moment, then very deliberately placed her head on Maggie's hand. The weight was slight, but the meaning was clear. Forgiveness, trust, connection. Maggie thought of Michael, of Rex, of all the lives connected by sacrifice and love. She thought of David in his wheelchair, of Linda with her bruised face, of Bob dying of cancer, of Grace about to raise a child alone. So much pain, so much loss. But also 4 puppies breathing in their box. Hope alive against all odds. A community rallying around a stranger, light finding cracks in the darkness. She sat with Hope through the night, not sleeping, just being present. Outside, December wind howled around the clinic. Inside, a family was being born, not of blood but of choice. At dawn, Bob woke up. He shuffled into the room, looking like death but smiling. "She's still alive," he said, wonder in his voice. "She's still alive," Maggie confirmed. "Then it was worth it. All of it." He sat down beside her, and together they watched Hope breathe. 2 elderly people, both near their own endings, both finding purpose in preserving one small life. Grace arrived at 7 with coffee and news. The fundraiser hit 20,000 overnight, she said. And Marcus is in jail. What? David filed a formal complaint. Elder abuse against Linda, showed pictures he'd been secretly taking for months. Sheriff Bradley had to act. Grace grinned fiercely. And there's more. Linda signed an affidavit about Marcus abandoning Hope. With her testimony, the ownership papers don't mean much. Hope is legally yours now, pending the abuse investigation. Maggie felt something loosen in her chest. Some knot she'd been carrying since that rest stop. It's going to be okay, Grace said softly. It's all going to be okay. And for the first time in 10 years, Maggie let herself believe it might be true. December 23rd began with hope and ended with death waiting at the door. Hope had been recovering steadily for 3 days. Her surgical wounds showed no signs of infection. She'd begun eating soft food. The 4 puppies were thriving, their eyes still closed but bodies growing stronger with each feeding. Then at 6 p.m., Hope's temperature spiked to 105 degrees. Maggie felt the heat radiating from the dog's body before she even checked the thermometer. Hope's breathing had become rapid and shallow. Her gums, which had been pink that morning, were now pale gray. "Bob," Maggie called, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need you." Bob shuffled in, took one look at Hope, and his face went gray. "Sepsis. The surgical site must be infected." They cut away the bandages. The C-section incision looked clean, but the tumor removal site was angry red with purulent drainage seeping through the sutures. "Broad-spectrum antibiotics," Maggie ordered. "Now." Grace administered the injection. They waited. Hope's temperature climbed to 106. "It's not working," Grace whispered. Bob checked Hope's blood pressure. "Her kidneys are starting to fail. She needs dialysis." "We don't have dialysis equipment. The animal hospital in Denver does, 2 hours away." Maggie looked out the window. A blizzard had started an hour ago, snow falling so thick she could barely see across the parking lot. The roads would be impassable by now. "She won't survive the transport anyway," Bob said quietly. "Maggie, I think we need to consider—" "Don't." The word came out sharp. "Don't say it." "She's in pain. Her organs are shutting down. The humane thing—" "I said, don't." But Maggie knew he was right. She'd made this call 100 times in her career. Sometimes fighting only prolonged suffering. Sometimes love meant letting go. She looked at the 4 puppies in their warming box, squirming and mewling. Without Hope, they'd need round-the-clock bottle feeding. Every 2 hours, 24 hours a day. She was 72 years old. Grace was 8 months pregnant. Bob could barely stand. Her phone rang. Grace answered, listened, then turned pale. "It's the hospital. I need to come in. I'm having contractions." "Grace, no. They're regular. 5 minutes apart." Grace's hand went to her belly, and Maggie saw fear in the young woman's eyes. "I'm 3 weeks early. Something's wrong." The ambulance arrived 15 minutes later. Maggie watched them load Grace, watched the red lights disappear into the blizzard, and felt the world contracting around her. Bob sat heavily in a chair. "I can help with the puppies tonight, but Maggie, I'm not well. The cancer's spreading faster than they thought. I might have weeks, not months." She was going to lose everything. The clinic to foreclosure in 2 days, Grace to motherhood, Bob to cancer, and now Hope to infection. The town had raised $30,000. But what good was money if there was no one left to save? People began gathering outside around 9 p.m. Sally from the diner brought candles. The VFW post brought American flags. Someone started singing Silent Night. Others joined in, their voices muffled by falling snow. A vigil. They were holding a vigil for a dog they'd never met. Maggie stood at the window watching them, these neighbors who'd rallied for a stranger. She thought about turning away, hiding in her grief. but something made her unlock the door. They filed in quietly. Sally, Pastor Michael Davies, old veterans with weathered faces, young families with children, the owner of the hardware store, the librarian, the postmaster. 20 people crowding into her small clinic, bringing the smell of snow and coffee and hope. "We wanted to be here," Sally said simply. "Whatever happens, you shouldn't be alone." At midnight, the power went out. The generator kicked in, but it was old, temperamental. Lights flickered. The heating system groaned and died. Temperature inside began dropping. The crowd had gone home around 11, promising to return at dawn. Now it was just Maggie and Bob and Hope, the clinic growing colder by the minute. Hope's breathing had become labored. The heart monitor showed an irregular rhythm, missing beats, stuttering. "Maggie," Bob said gently, "it's time." She knew what he meant. The bottle of euthanasia solution sat in the medication cabinet. One injection. Sleep. Peace. End of pain. Her hand went to her coat pocket, felt the pill bottle she'd been carrying for weeks. She'd come so close to swallowing those pills herself. Would have, if not for finding Hope. And now Hope was dying anyway, and maybe that was the universe telling her the truth. Some things couldn't be saved. Some pain was permanent. She pulled out the pills, looked at them in the dim emergency lighting. Then she heard a sound, Hope's paw scraping weakly against the crate floor. She looked down. Hope's eyes were open, watching her. The dog's tail moved once, barely perceptible, still fighting. Maggie put the pills back in her pocket. "Not yet," she said. "She's still fighting. So will I." At 3:33 a.m., Hope's heart stopped. The monitor's alarm shrieked. Bob lunged for the crash cart, but Maggie was faster. She had Hope out of the crate, on the floor, her hands positioned on the dog's chest. 1, 2, 3, 4, she counted, pressing down. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. Repeat. Bob tried to take over, but his hands were shaking too badly. Cancer had stolen his strength. "Keep timing," Maggie gasped. "Tell me when to stop." 1 minute. No heartbeat. Her arms burned. 72-year-old arms, arthritic shoulders, hands that had buried a husband and a son, but they kept moving. 2 minutes. Nothing. "Maggie," Bob said. "It's been too long." 3 minutes. Brain damage likely. "Just a little more." 4 minutes. Medically, it was over. But Maggie thought of Hope sitting in the snow for 3 days, waiting. Hope surviving surgery no dog should survive. Hope forgiving Marcus Webb with a lick of her hand. Hope fighting when any reasonable creature would have quit. "Come on, Hope," Maggie sobbed, still pumping. "Come on. You don't get to quit. I didn't quit, and neither do you." 4 minutes, 30 seconds. The monitor beeped once, twice. Rhythm establishing. Hope gasped, her whole body convulsing as air rushed into her lungs. Her eyes fluttered open, found Maggie's face. Maggie collapsed beside the dog, chest heaving, arms useless. "You stubborn, beautiful girl," she whispered. The 4 puppies in their box began crying, all at once, as if they'd sensed their mother's distress. Hope tried to stand, couldn't, whimpered. "I've got them," Bob said, his voice thick. He brought the warming box over. Hope sniffed each puppy frantically, licking them, making soft maternal sounds. Then Linda Webb, who'd been sleeping in the back room, appeared in the doorway. I heard the alarm. "Is she?" She stopped, seeing Hope alive. "Oh, thank God." Linda moved toward the refrigerator to get ice for Hope's fever. She opened the door, reached for the ice tray, then froze. "What?" Maggie asked. Linda's face had gone white. "I heard something." From the back of the fridge. They all heard it then, a tiny muffled whimper. Maggie's heart stopped. The puppy. The dead puppy, placed in a plastic bag 18 hours ago according to protocol. The body they'd planned to cremate. Linda pulled out the bag with shaking hands. Through the plastic they could see movement. "That's impossible," Bob breathed. Maggie tore open the bag. The puppy was cold, so cold, but its tiny chest was moving. Shallow breaths, barely there, but breathing. "Warming blanket now." Maggie's training took over. "Bob, get the oxygen. Linda, warm water, not hot." They worked together, warming the puppy gradually. Its color changed from blue-gray to pink. After 10 minutes that felt like hours, the puppy opened its mouth and cried. A thin, reedy sound that was the most beautiful thing Maggie had ever heard. "How is this possible?" Linda whispered. Bob was checking his phone with shaking hands. Suspended animation. There are documented cases. Extreme cold can slow metabolism to near death. If warmed properly. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "It's called a Christmas miracle." Hope, watching from her crate, made a sound Maggie had never heard her make before, something between a whimper and a cry of joy. Maggie brought the 5th puppy to her mother. Hope sniffed it intensely, then pulled all 5 puppies close with her nose, her tail wagging for the first time since surgery. The sun rose over Pinewood at 7:15 a.m. on Christmas Eve morning. Maggie stood at the clinic window holding a cup of coffee someone had brought, watching her town wake up. Church bells began ringing. Not the usual Sunday pattern, but something exuberant, celebratory. Pastor Davies had heard the news. By 8 a.m. a crowd had gathered again, this time bringing joy instead of vigil candles. Maggie's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages from across the country. The story had gone national. Puppy returns from dead on Christmas Eve. The hashtag #HatMiraclePuppy was trending. The GoFundMe had reached $50,000. "Maggie?" Bob touched her shoulder. "The hospital called. Grace had her baby, a girl, 6 pounds, perfectly healthy. 3 weeks early? Sometimes babies know when it's time." Bob smiled. "Grace named her Hope Grace Chen, after our girl." At 10 a.m., Richard Foster appeared at the clinic door. Maggie recognized the bank manager immediately, the man who'd sent the foreclosure notice, who'd been calling weekly about the debt. Her stomach sank. She'd been so focused on Hope that she'd forgotten. The clinic was still lost. "Mr. Foster," she said wearily, "I know what day it is. I know what I owe, but I'm asking for one more day. Let me get through Christmas and then, Mrs. Thompson." He held up a hand and she saw his eyes were red. "May I see the dog?" Confused, she led him to Hope's crate. Hope was nursing all 5 puppies now, her body wrapped around them protectively. Foster stared for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He knelt down stiffly, as if his knees hurt. 15 years ago, he said quietly, I was in Iraq, Fallujah. My unit got separated during an ambush. We were going to walk straight into an IED nest. He looked up at Maggie. A K-9 named Rex detected it, went crazy barking, wouldn't let us pass, saved 12 lives that day. Mine included. Maggie's breath caught. Rex. I tracked his bloodline after I got home. Wanted to know what happened to the dog that saved my life. Rex died in Afghanistan saving soldiers from an IED. His handler died trying to save him, a Sergeant Michael Thompson. The room tilted. Your son, Foster continued. Your son died saving the dog that saved me. And this, he gestured to Hope. This is Rex's granddaughter. When I saw her chip registration come through our system, I knew. I've been watching from a distance, hoping someone would help her. You knew Marcus was abusing her? I suspected, but I had no proof, no right to interfere. He pulled papers from his briefcase. I've lived with that guilt every day, so I'm here to pay my debt. He handed her a document. Your clinic debt, $45,000, is forgiven. Paid in full. Consider it interest on the life your son saved. Maggie couldn't speak. Foster stood, wincing at the effort. There's something else you should know. I have pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. 2 months left, maybe less. I wanted to do something meaningful with the time I have. This seemed like a start. He turned to leave, but Maggie found her voice. Mr. Foster, thank you. He nodded once and walked out into the Christmas Eve morning. Behind her, Hope made a contented sound, her 5 puppies nursing peacefully. Outside, church bells were still ringing. Bob was crying quietly in the corner. Linda stood with her hand over her mouth, and Maggie, for the first time in 10 years, felt something like peace. The miracle of Christmas Eve morning lasted exactly 4 hours. At 2 p.m., Sheriff Bradley called with news that drained the joy from Maggie's chest. Marcus Webb had posted bail. $50,000, Bradley said, frustration evident in his voice. Posted by someone anonymous. He's out, Maggie, and he's angry. He can't take Hope. The investigation is ongoing, which means technically the ownership's still disputed. I can't stop him from trying. Bradley paused. Lock your doors. I'm sending a deputy to watch the clinic. Maggie hung up and found Bob staring at her. He's coming, isn't he? Yes. Linda, who'd been folding blankets in the corner, dropped them. Her hands shook. I need to leave. If he finds me here, you're staying, Maggie said firmly. We're all staying, together. By 3 p.m., word had spread. The town began arriving, not with candles this time, but with grim determination. 30 people formed a human barrier around the clinic entrance. Veterans from the VFW post, Sally from the diner, Pastor Michael Davies, even the teenagers from the high school who'd seen the story on social media. Nobody's taking that dog, Sally announced. Not after what she's been through. Marcus's truck appeared at 4:30, driving too fast through the snowy parking lot. He emerged, swaying slightly, drunk or hungry for violence. Maggie couldn't tell which. His face was unshaven, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. Get out of my way, he roared at the crowd. Nobody moved. That's my property. You're all trespassing. Pastor Davies stepped forward. Marcus, please, let's talk about this. You! Marcus's face twisted with rage. You knew. You all knew what I was going through, and nobody helped. Nobody understood. We wanted to help, Pastor Davies said quietly, but you wouldn't let us. You pushed everyone away. Because you all judged me. My son's in a wheelchair, and you— His voice cracked. You all think I'm some kind of monster. You beat a pregnant dog and left her to freeze to death, Sally said flatly. What else would we call you? The crowd murmured agreement. Marcus looked around at the faces, neighbors he'd known for decades, all looking at him with contempt or pity or both. Then David Webb's van pulled up. The crowd parted as David maneuvered his wheelchair through the snow. Linda emerged from the clinic and froze when she saw her son, then moved to stand beside him. Father and son faced each other for the first time since the arrest. David, Marcus's voice broke. Son, tell them I'm not— You are, Dad. David's voice was steady, but tears tracked down his face. You are exactly what they think you are. And it breaks my heart. I did everything for you. Everything. I got that dog to help you, to give you something to care about. You got that dog to punish yourself. And when that didn't work, you punished her instead. David wheeled closer. Rex didn't fail me, Dad. He saved me. He pushed me out of the way of that IED. He took the blast meant for me. But if he'd been faster, I'd still be paralyzed or dead. The bomb was too big, too close. Rex did his job perfectly. David's hands gripped his wheelchair arms. Sergeant Thompson, Mrs. Thompson's son. He went back for Rex even though the area wasn't secure. He died trying to save the dog that saved my life. He was a hero. Rex was a hero. And you've spent 10 years blaming them for something that was nobody's fault. Marcus's legs seemed to give out. He dropped to his knees in the snow, a large man, suddenly small. I wanted my son back, he sobbed. I wanted you to walk. I wanted to undo it all. I wanted... His voice dissolved into choking sobs. The crowd stood silent, watching a man break apart. Pastor Davies knelt beside him. Marcus, we've all wanted to undo things. Loss is part of being human, but cruelty to innocence? That's a choice. And you chose wrong. I know. Marcus's face was in his hands. God help me, I know. Linda stepped forward then, moving slowly, deliberately. She removed her sunglasses. She'd been wearing them all day despite the gray weather. The bruises on her face had darkened to deep purple. Marcus, look at me. He looked up, saw her face, saw what he'd done. I'm leaving, Linda said simply. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm done. Linda, please. You hit me for begging you not to kill a pregnant dog. You hit me for showing compassion. Her voice didn't waver. I stayed for 25 years. I made excuses. I told myself you were grieving, that you'd get better. But you didn't get better. You got worse. And I'm done. She turned to David. I'm sorry I didn't protect you from this. I'm sorry I let you grow up watching your father become this. Mom, it's not your fault. It is. Partly. I should have left years ago, but I'm leaving now. She looked back at Marcus one final time. I hope you get help. I really do. But I won't be there to watch you destroy yourself anymore. She walked away. The crowd parted for her. She didn't look back. Marcus remained on his knees, snow soaking through his jeans, watching his wife walk away. His shoulders shook with sobs. David wheeled closer to his father. Dad, I'll help you, but only if you get real help. Therapy, anger management, AA if you're drinking again, the whole thing. I'll do anything. Then prove it. David's voice was hard. Starting now, you're going to apologize to Hope. Marcus looked up at the clinic where Maggie stood in the doorway. She won't want me near that dog. That's not your choice anymore, Maggie said. But if you want any chance at redemption, if you want your son's respect back, you'll face what you did. Marcus stood slowly, moving like a man 3 times his age. The crowd parted reluctantly as he approached the clinic. Maggie stepped aside. Inside, Hope was in her crate with all 5 puppies. She saw Marcus and her whole body went rigid. A growl started low in her throat. The first time Maggie had ever heard her growl. The puppies sensed their mother's fear and began whimpering. Marcus stopped 10 feet away as if he'd hit an invisible wall. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve any of it. You were just there. And I took everything out on you because I couldn't face myself. Hope's growl intensified. I wanted to destroy something because I felt destroyed. I wanted something to hurt as much as I hurt. And you were innocent and trusting, and that made it worse somehow, made me angrier. Tears ran down his face. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry. Hope stopped growling. She stared at him with those intelligent brown eyes, assessing, judging. Then she turned away, curling her body around her puppies, dismissing him. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement. Marcus nodded once and left. Outside, Sheriff Bradley was waiting with handcuffs. "There's the matter of violating the restraining order Linda filed this morning. You'll need to come with me." Marcus didn't resist. He let them cuff him, let them lead him to the patrol car. The crowd watched in silence as he was driven away. David sat in his wheelchair, his mother's hand on his shoulder, both of them watching the taillights disappear. "Is it wrong that I feel relieved and heartbroken at the same time?" David asked quietly. "No," Maggie said, standing beside them. "That's just what love looks like when it's been broken for too long." Inside the clinic, Hope nursed her 5 puppies. The miracle puppy, they'd started calling him Miracle, was the most vigorous nurser of all, as if making up for lost time. Bob sat watching them, his face peaceful despite the pain Maggie knew he was in. "Do you think he'll get better?" Bob asked. "Marcus? I don't know," Maggie said honestly. "But that's not our responsibility anymore. Ours is healing what can be healed." She looked at Hope, at the 5 puppies, at Bob, dying but present, at Linda and David beginning to rebuild their relationship, at the community that had stood together. Not everything broken could be fixed, but some things could. And maybe that was enough. Outside, Christmas Eve snow began to fall again, soft and silent, covering the tracks of Marcus's truck, making everything clean and new. Christmas Eve service at Pinewood Community Church was standing room only. Pastor Michael Davies stood at the pulpit, looking out at faces he'd known for decades. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and white lights, the scent of pine filling the air. But the mood wasn't celebratory, it was something deeper, anticipatory. "Tonight," he began, "I want to talk about grace in unexpected places." He told them everything. His silence about Marcus's abuse, his choice of donor money over moral courage, his resignation, effective January 1st. "I enabled suffering through cowardice," he said. "I told myself I had no proof, that it wasn't my place to interfere. But the truth is, I was afraid of conflict, afraid of losing funding, afraid of making hard choices." He paused. "I'm donating my severance package, $50,000, to the veterinary sanctuary Mrs. Thompson is creating. It's not penance, it's privilege." The privilege of trying to do better. The congregation sat in stunned silence for a moment. Then someone began to clap. Others joined. Not everyone. Some faces remained stony, but enough. "Now," Pastor Davies said, "I'd like to open the floor if anyone has something to share about what this week has meant to them." An elderly woman in the 3rd row stood slowly. Maggie recognized her. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, who lived alone on Elm Street. "My husband beat me for 32 years, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice steady. "Everyone in this town knew. Nobody did anything. He died 2 years ago, and I thought I was free, but I wasn't. I was still afraid, still hiding." She looked directly at Maggie. "Watching you stand up to Marcus Webb, watching you fight for that dog even when it cost you everything, it gave me courage. Yesterday, I joined a support group for domestic violence survivors. At 83 years old, I'm finally getting help." 3 more people stood. A veteran with PTSD who said Hope's recovery gave him hope for his own. A single mother who'd been on the verge of giving up custody of her children. A teenager struggling with depression who'd seen the story online and realized, if a dog can fight that hard to live, maybe I can too. Then Sally from the diner. This town was dying. We all felt it. Young people leaving, businesses closing, everyone just existing. But this week we remembered what community means. We remembered we're stronger together. Pastor Davies gestured toward Maggie sitting in the back pew. "Mrs. Thompson, would you say a few words?" She hadn't prepared anything. hadn't expected to speak. But she stood on legs that felt unsteady and made her way to the front. Looking out at her neighbors, she felt 10 years of isolation crack apart. "My son Michael died in Afghanistan 10 years ago," she began. "K-9 handler, 29 years old. The Army sent me a flag and a letter thanking me for his sacrifice." Her voice caught. "For 10 years I've been angry at God, at the Army, at the world. I stopped coming to church, stopped believing in much of anything except loss." She saw heads nodding. They understood. "Last Tuesday, I drove to the Highway 40 rest stop, planning to end my life. I had 60 sleeping pills in my pocket. I was done fighting." She pulled out the pill bottle, held it up. "Then I found Hope, and she was fighting. Pregnant, freezing, dying from a tumor, but still fighting. Still hoping someone would see her." The church was absolutely silent. "My son died saving a military dog named Rex. Rex died trying to protect soldiers. And Hope, Liberty, is Rex's granddaughter. My son sent her to me. I know that sounds crazy, but I believe it. He sent her because he knew I'd forgotten how to fight, how to hope, how to live." She looked at the pill bottle in her hand, then walked to Pastor Davies and placed it in his palm. "I don't need these anymore." The congregation erupted, not in applause but in something deeper, a collective exhale, as if they'd all been holding their breath. David Webb was in the front row in his wheelchair. He raised his hand. "I'd like to say something." Pastor Davies helped position the wheelchair at the front. "Sergeant Michael Thompson saved my life," David said. "And Rex, Hope's grandfather, saved my life. My father spent 10 years blaming them for my paralysis. But the truth is, without them, I'd be dead. We all would." He gripped the arms of his wheelchair and, with visible effort, stood. His legs shook. He took one step, then another, using the pulpit for support. The congregation gasped. "I've been in physical therapy for 8 months, David explained, breathing hard. "Didn't tell anyone because I wasn't sure it would work. But watching Hope recover from surgery, watching her learn to walk again with part of her shoulder bone missing." He took another step. "If she could do it, so could I." He walked 5 steps to where Maggie stood and embraced her. "Your son is my hero," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're my hero." There wasn't a dry eye in the church. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of crystalline brightness that only follows fresh snow. The blizzard had passed, leaving Pinewood looking like a postcard. Grace arrived at the clinic at 7 a.m. with her newborn daughter, tiny Hope Grace Chen, wrapped in a blanket covered with puppy prints. "I wanted them to meet," Grace said, her eyes shining. "The two Hopes." Maggie held the baby carefully, marveling at her perfect tiny fingers. Then she brought the baby close to the dog's crate. Hope sniffed carefully, her tail wagging gently, and made a soft maternal sound. The 5 puppies were 2 weeks old now, eyes still closed but bodies growing stronger. They squirmed over each other in a pile of black and tan fur. "We should name them," Linda suggested. She'd been staying at the clinic, sleeping in the spare room. Divorce papers had been filed. A restraining order was in place. She was beginning, slowly, to heal. "The town's been voting online," Grace said, pulling up her phone. "Over 10,000 votes. Here are the top names. Miracle, obviously, for the one who came back. Then Grace, Michael, Rex, and Liberty." Maggie's throat tightened. Grace for Grace Chen. Michael for her son. Rex for the grandfather. Liberty for Hope's original name. Perfect, she whispered. By noon, word had spread that the puppies were ready for socialization visits. 50 families had already applied to adopt. How do we choose? Linda asked, overwhelmed by the applications. David, who'd stayed overnight, had an idea. Let Hope choose. They set up a rotation. Each prospective family came in one at a time and sat quietly while Hope observed. The puppies were brought out, one by one, and allowed to interact with the visitors. Miracle, the puppy who'd survived the refrigerator, immediately bonded with an elderly veteran named James Sullivan. The man had hollow eyes and shaking hands, PTSD written in every line of his body. When Miracle climbed into his lap and fell asleep, James began to cry. "He needs me," James whispered. "I can feel it." Hope watched carefully, then gave a soft woof. Approval. Grace, named after Grace Chen, connected with a single mother named Rebecca, who'd escaped domestic violence with 3 young children. The puppy kept returning to Rebecca even when other families called. "She keeps picking me," Rebecca said, wonder in her voice. "Is that okay?" Hope's tail wagged. Another approval. Michael, the largest puppy, chose a young military family. The father was deploying to Germany in 3 months and wanted his children to have a dog trained in military working dog traditions. Hope watched the father handle Michael with practiced expertise and seemed satisfied. Rex gravitated toward a police officer named Sandra Martinez, who ran the K9 unit in the next county. "I've been looking for a German Shepherd with Rex's bloodline for years," Sandra explained. "Our breeding program needs strong genetics." That left Liberty, the smallest puppy, who hadn't bonded with anyone yet. Family after family visited, but Liberty kept returning to Hope, curling up at her mother's side. "Maybe she's not ready," Maggie said. Then Grace had an idea. "What if Liberty stays here, with Hope and you? Start the sanctuary with Hope and her daughter." Maggie looked at Hope, who was watching her with those intelligent brown eyes, at Liberty, sleeping peacefully against her mother's side. "Yes," Maggie said. "Yes, that feels right." That evening, Bob pulled Maggie aside. He looked worse than he had that morning. The cancer was progressing rapidly. "I got results back from the extended DNA panel I ran on Hope," he said quietly, handing her a printout. "I was curious about her full lineage." Maggie scanned the document. Hope's line didn't just go back to Rex, it went back further. Rex's grandfather had saved 30 soldiers in World War I. His great-great-grandfather had been part of the first military dog program in American history. "She comes from a bloodline of heroes," Bob said. 4 generations of dogs who gave everything in service. Your son died protecting that legacy, and now you're ensuring it continues." Maggie looked at Hope, nursing Liberty, teaching her daughter to be strong, to trust, to love despite pain. 3 generations in one room. Hope the mother, Liberty the daughter, and the promise of granddaughters to come through Liberty's eventual puppies. Michael's sacrifice hadn't been for nothing. Rex's death had meaning, and Hope, Liberty, was the living bridge between past and future. "This is what he died for," Maggie whispered. "This." Bob squeezed her shoulder. "Legacy isn't about blood. It's about what we choose to pass forward. Your son chose sacrifice. Rex chose loyalty. Hope chose forgiveness. And you're choosing to honor all of it." Outside, Christmas lights twinkled on Main Street. Inside the clinic, a family was being born, not of genetics, but of choice and courage and love that transcended species. Maggie sat with Hope and Liberty, feeling more at peace than she had in 10 years. The pill bottle was gone. The foreclosure was paid. The clinic would become a sanctuary. And 5 puppies would go into the world carrying Hope's legacy of resilience, proving that even the most broken things could heal if someone cared enough to try. Christmas morning dawned clear and bright over Pinewood. Maggie woke to sounds she hadn't heard in a decade. Footsteps overhead, water running, voices murmuring. Life. Her house, her clinic, was full of life. Grace and baby Hope slept in the upstairs guest room. Linda had taken the spare room downstairs. Bob dozed in the recliner by the wood stove, too weak to make it home. David had stayed overnight, working toward reconciliation with his mother. And in the recovery room, Hope nursed Liberty while the other 4 puppies prepared for their new homes. Maggie made breakfast for 6 humans and 2 dogs. The dining table that had been set for 10 years now overflowed with mismatched plates and coffee mugs. She paused in the doorway, taking it in. The noise, the chaos, the presence of family. Not by blood, but by choice. Bob caught her eye and smiled. "Merry Christmas, Maggie." "Merry Christmas." The town dropped off presents throughout the morning. For Hope, a custom support vest that helped stabilize her shoulder. For the puppies, toys and blankets. For Maggie, a bronze plaque reading Thompson Veterans Animal Sanctuary in honor of Sergeant Michael Thompson, Hero. The old clinic sign came down at noon. The new one went up to applause from gathered neighbors. Grace made an announcement over Christmas dinner. "Maggie, I have a request. Will you be Hope's godmother? The baby, I mean. And—" she took a breath. "Will you teach me veterinary nursing? I want to stay, help run the sanctuary, if you'll have us." Maggie's vision blurred. "I'd be honored." Linda spoke quietly from across the table. "Can I stay too? I could manage the administrative work, handle adoptions." "You're family now," Maggie said simply. "This is your home." 6 months later, on a warm May morning, Maggie sat on the porch of the sanctuary watching spring arrive. The 15 animals in residence, all veterans' dogs or horses, grazed or played in the newly fenced pastures. Hope walked beside her, Liberty bounding ahead with the energy of a 6-month-old puppy. Grace had completed her veterinary nursing certification and managed the clinic with quiet competence. Baby Hope babbled in a playpen nearby. Linda ran the sanctuary's operations with surprising skill, finally free from Marcus's shadow. Bob had passed peacefully in March, surrounded by everyone he loved. They'd buried him with military honors, his memorial bench overlooking the sanctuary he'd helped create. David visited weekly, now walking with only a cane. Marcus remained in therapy, supervised visits allowed but rarely requested. Richard Foster had died in February, leaving an additional $100,000 to the sanctuary. His name joined Michael's on the memorial wall. Maggie was 73 now. Her arthritis still hurt. Some mornings were harder than others. But every morning, she had a reason to get up. Hope placed her head on Maggie's lap, Liberty mimicking the gesture on the other side. "You saved me, girl," Maggie whispered. "In every way a person can be saved." Hope's tail wagged. Liberty's too. In the distance, church bells rang the noon hour. The sanctuary bustled with life, animals healing, people healing, all of them learning that broken things could be mended with patience and love. Maggie closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face, and smiled. She was home. Sometimes we reach a point where we wonder if anyone would even notice if we disappeared. The phone stops ringing. The house feels too big. The mirror reflects a stranger who's lost their purpose. Maggie felt that way, sitting in her truck with pills in her pocket, convinced the world had moved on without her. but hope changed everything. Not because saving a dog erased her pain, but because it reminded her of a truth we all forget. We matter most when we're needed. When Maggie wrapped her coat around Hope in that freezing parking lot, she wasn't just saving a dog, she was reclaiming her own life. She discovered that family isn't always blood, that home is wherever people need you, and that the most meaningful chapters can be written after everything seems lost. Hope taught her that broken things can heal, that second chances exist at any age, and that love, real, unconditional love, is worth fighting for, even when your hands shake and your knees hurt. What moment in your life reminded you that you still matter? Have you ever found purpose in an unexpected place? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.